Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call to order the study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for September 16th, 2019. Let me go to citizen comment and then we'll come back to introduction. I would like to start our meeting tonight with citizen comment on any agenda items. If you are here from the public and would like to address the council on the agenda item, which our only agenda item is the presentation of the 2020 proposed budget. We will take comment on that now. I'm looking to see, we have a sign-up sheet. I don't know who has signed up to speak, but I will call your name, and if you would come to the microphone at the podium when I call your name, and give us your first name and last name. If you'd spell your last name and give us your address, we will go from there, and I think we have 3 minutes for comments. So our first speaker is Vivian Voss and Jan Rose on deck.
Good evening. Vivian Voss, 6920 West 47th Place. Boy, going over that budget was fascinating. I've never been a numbers person, and just budgets just like, oh, freaky. But it was easy to read. I was glad that I did. 326 pages, but it was so informative. And if anybody's interested in how the city is run and where our money goes, that's the place to look. So I would encourage that to be read between now and the next couple of days. But one of my concerns, and I've been talking to people about this, so it's not just me, other people feel that the green development by Stevens Elementary is rather silly in two facts. I feel and they feel that it's a want, not a need, and we're spending $900,000 plus on this development. And it's my understanding that the city does not even own the property that we're trying to develop, and so I'm wondering, why would we be doing that for somebody else who owns the property? I understand Jefferson County Schools owns the property, and I would like to have it be public if there is a letter of agreement and an okay to build on this property site from Jefferson County Schools. If there is, I think it should be made public on the web page, and if it's not a letter from Jefferson County Public Schools, I feel that we have no right as a city to spend citizens' money, no matter how it's accounted for, on this piece of development. It's a want, not a need, and I think we have much more need for money going in different places throughout the city for $900,000 plus. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jan Rose and Janelle Shaver on deck.
Hi, I'm Jan Rose. I was here a couple of months ago about my solar panels, if the name or the voice rings a bell. I am back here tonight wearing my official volunteer pin because in addition to being a citizen, I volunteer for a good half dozen environmental organizations when I'm not fixing broken websites, which is what I do for a living. And as a result of my volunteer work, I'm working with the county on their forthcoming climate action plan, and I work with the state on state legislation for next year, and I work with both the COGCC and the CDPHE on the rulemakings that will turn the laws we passed last year into enforcement. So that's my climate background, and based on my solar panels and my worries about capture, you can imagine that I could not disagree with the previous speaker any more than I do. I am disappointed in the budget because I was here for the very first time a year ago asking you for some staff to address sustainability and asking you to recognize that in the last 5 years, we've both had a multi-billion-dollar flood to deal with and a billion-dollar hailstorm. And you might recall that I mentioned to you that all of us living in Wheat Ridge that had solar panels on our roof did not need our roofs replaced. And everybody else did. You guys, I don't know, issued a couple million in permits. So I'm disappointed that A, y'all got no solar panels on any of your municipal buildings. And I will be at the Denver Press Club shortly to listen to a bunch of mayors discuss their programs. And as a result of that, I have looked at the environmental sustainability plan, and it is excellent. I have looked at the plans for all of the cities, major cities in Jeffco, in conjunction with this county work I'm doing, and Wheat Ridge's is a really outstanding plan, and kudos to all your volunteers, but they can only recommend, they cannot implement. And I want you to know that right now, just for this building, you can get your solar panels installed for free. You can get the full federal income tax credit. You can get a state credit. You can produce so much power like me that you get a check back from Xcel Energy every year, and you can use all that excess power, put in a charging station in front of this building so that you can benefit the community. Furthermore, there is a program that Colorado Renewable Energy Society put together that is offering a fleet purchase to anybody who wants to buy one, and it's 60% off an all-electric Nissan Leaf. You could buy a Nissan Leaf for code enforcement for $11,900, and you would never have to buy another tune-up or another oil change in your lives, and you could just use it for code enforcement. So please add a staffer to the budget, please, I'm begging you, and I imagine if I was on the Environmental Sustainability Committee, they'd be begging you too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Our next speaker is Janelle Shaver.
I haven't looked at the budget, but I have this funny feeling that there's nothing in there for what I'm about to say, and that is rats. There are rats all over this community, and you all know it. They're in every neighborhood. We had a lady come in here a couple weeks ago, came to the city hall, to the city clerk's office. Her neighbor had trapped 9 rats. She's trapped 3. My daughter has had 3 dead rats, and she's calling Orkin. I know they're down in the valley in District 4. They're in District 2 on the hill. They're in District 3. They're in District 1. You need to do something about it. I mean, for all the money that you're spending on all the fun stuff and the glitzy stuff, this really bothers people. And I don't want to say what the new nickname for Wheat Ridge is. So you can just kind of guess and figure that out. But I really hope there's some money can get allocated to address this problem, because it's all over the city and everybody knows it.
Thank you. That's all of the speakers that I have signed up to speak. Is there anyone here tonight who has not signed up who would like to speak under public comment? You may do so now. I don't see anybody else, so we will close our public comment portion and move to item number 1, which is a presentation of the 2020 proposed budget. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Before you do that, I want to recognize for the minutes that we have all of our counselors here today with us, except for Ms. Davis, and she indicated that she might be a little late, so we're looking for her. So with that, please go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have our whole budget team here this evening, so I want to make sure everybody is introduced. So, council, you don't see some of these folks every Monday night. So, why don't we start with Mary Ann? I think you all know Mary Ann, but please introduce yourselves and tell us what your role is. Oh, yeah. Can you, let's see, we'll get you a mic.
Hi, good evening. I'm Marianne Schilling. I'm assistant to the city manager, and I support Allie and Patrick with the budget.
Hi, I'm Susan Anderson, and I'm the Facility and Recreation Manager for the Parks and Recreation Department.
Hello, my name is Zach Lovato. I'm the manager of Parks, Forestry, and Open Space. I've been here for about 5 months now.
Hi, I'm Steve Wynn, engineering manager and a co-director of Public Works, interim for the time being, responsible for planning and design of construction projects.
Hi, I'm Greg Knutson, and I'm the Public Works Operations Manager and the other co-director in Public Works.
Kirsten Armstrong, Court Administrator.
Thank you, everybody. Go ahead, Allie. I think you know everybody else, but
Good evening, Allison Shack, Administrative Services Director, and it's been my pleasure to work on my first budget for the City of Wheat Ridge. Thanks.
Dave Pickett, Interim Police Chief.
Ken Johnstone, Director of Community Development.
Karen O'Donnell, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Thank you all and welcome.
great, thank you for that. It does take a very large team to get this budget done, so I want to thank everybody that is here, and they're all part of our budget team. And thank Allie and Marianne. This is their first budget. It's my 18th, but it's their first, so went very well. So we're happy to present it to you this evening. So we're going to kind of tag team this, and you won't have to listen to me all night. So, but I will start it off here this morning. Y'all should. Did everybody get I think you all got a copy of the handout of the PowerPoint presentation. We'll get the lights. If the videographer could shut the camera lights off, that would be awesome, so we can see the screen. Great. You just have to speak. That's what you do. That works.
Did you find out you're already redundant?
Oh.
But we love you anyway.
So if it's okay with you, we'll leave questions to the end. If there's just a burning question that you need to get an answer to so that you understand the rest of the presentation, please interrupt. We'd be happy to answer that. But so let's get started. So tonight, this is our agenda for this evening, and I won't go through that point by point, but basically going to go over the entire budget. If you read your budget message, this is essentially a summary of that. So. Oh, and I didn't get, do you have a notes version? Can I use yours? Oops. Yes. Videographer? Mr. Matthews. Perfect, thank you. Okay, so as you all know, we've had a lot going on in our community this year, and we found a slide to that we could finally use that picture of Councilmember Weaver and the mayor sitting in their lovely pipe. But again, it's been a very active year, as you all know. We're still celebrating our 50th anniversary, which is awesome. We've been having a lot of fun with that. We opened the G line, believe it or not. When was that? In April. So that was fun. Celebrated many businesses opening recently. I know a lot of you have gone to those ribbon cuttings recently, and we broke ground on the Clear Creek Crossing project. So seen a lot this year, and we have a lot to look forward to in the next few years. When we create the budget, as you all know, we look back to our vision that City Council had put together, and we'll probably have a new retreat here after the first of the year, after having a new City Council seated. But this is the current vision that the current council and the previous councils had put together. So Wheat Ridge is an attractive and inviting city and community for families, has great neighborhoods, is a hub of commerce with a choice of economically viable commercial areas, and has diverse transportation. Wheat Ridge is committed to environmental stewardship, and its residents enjoy an active, healthy lifestyle and are proud of their hometown. Wheat Ridge, a great place to live, work, and play. So hopefully you'll see many things that we've included in our budget that will help the city envision that vision statement. And so now we'll go into just a budget overview, talk about all of our revenues and expenditures. First, we're going to start with what our budget fund structure looks like, so you have an idea when we're talking about these different funds. So in general, we have the general fund operating budget. That's a majority of our budget. That's our day-to-day budget, where most of our employees are located and paid for out of, it's kind of like your checkbook where you pay for your daily bills. Then we have a bunch of special funds. They're either set up because of law, they're required by law to be set up separate, or just because they're more efficient for our budgeting purposes. And we'll talk about each of those briefly. Public Art Fund, Police Investigation Fund, Open Space, Municipal Court, Conservation Trust, Equipment Replacement, and Crime Prevention. And then, of course, we have our CIP budget. We keep it short for CIP, but that stands for Capital Improvement Program. So that's for all of our capital projects that have a useful life of a certain amount of time, and usually there's a certain threshold for budget which allows them to be in that fund. And then a new fund we created a couple years ago was our bond fund, the 2E bond fund, and that was set up for, of course, the temporary sales tax increase that our voters approved in 2016, November 2016. And that fund will be in existence as long as we're collecting that sales tax and until those bonds are paid off. You may note, if you remember from last year, there's one fund in here that is missing, and that's the Recreation Center Fund. We are proposing in the 2020 budget that fund be eliminated. That fund was set up for the creation of the Recreation Center and to manage the reserves that were created for that Recreation Center when there was a tax increase back in, what year was that? Do you remember what year that was? 99? I think there was a tax increase in 99 for the Recreation Center Fund. And those funds were segregated into a separate budget because we had those reserves that had to be used in the Recreation Center Fund only. Those reserves are gone. As we've been speaking to you for the last several years, we anticipated those funds would be gone pretty much this year or next year, I think we estimated. And so there's no need for that fund anymore. So all the Recreation Center revenues and operations expenditures will be compiled into the general fund. Next slide, please. So this is some big numbers here, but I put this in here because I just want you to get a sense of what the total budget is with and without the 2E bond fund. So you look at the right-hand column, that's all funds, including the 2E bond fund. So our total expenditures for 2020 we're projecting is just under $77 million. But if you look over just to the left, 15 million of that is for the 2E bond fund, and 61 million is for all other funds. So I won't go into that in more detail unless you have questions. Now, if you look at the total budget, again, we're still looking at the total budget, that $77 million. This graph shows how it's broken down by the specific funds. Again, the general fund, the operating budget fund, is half of our budget, 51%. CIP budget's 24% for next year. The 2E bond fund at 20%. The open space gets its own little slice there at 3%. They have a relatively larger budget next year for some projects which we'll speak to. And all the other special funds that I mentioned earlier are only make up 2% of that budget. And again, those are the Public Art, Police Investigation, Municipal Court, Conservation Trust, Equipment Replacement, and the Crime Prevention Code Enforcement budget. So now we're just going to look at general fund. So that 50% slice there of the total budget. So the general fund for 2020, we're projecting revenues of just under $40 million in 2020. We're projecting to have a beginning fund balance of about 13 million at the beginning of the year. So what that translates into at the end of this year, 2019, we're projecting that the ending fund balance is going to be about 30%. As you remember, we have a reserve policy, a fund balance policy, that our minimum must be 17%. We target 25%, and we have a max of 35%. Based on what we're projecting to spend by the end of this year and the revenues we're going to bring in, we're going to have a larger fund balance than projected, so that's always a good thing. Those dollars will just be carried over to next year. The revenues in 2020 are a 10% increase over this year's revenues. But remember, we're moving in the Recreation Center revenues and expenditures into the general fund. So if you subtract out those Recreation Center revenues, we're looking at about a 4% increase in revenues in the general fund compared to this year. Other items that contribute to that 4% increase are the new retail at the Applewood Shopping Center, and we'll talk more specific about that later. But though we're going to hopefully have a full year of revenues for the backfield Walmart, which we haven't had for a couple of years. And then there's quite a bit of building-related use tax and other building-related fees that we're projecting for 2020 that helps make up that 4% increase. Now, again, if you want to look at this graphically, this pie chart shows general fund revenue. And sales and use tax, as you all know, even your new ones, the new ones on council, I believe, know this by now, sales and use tax is our largest revenue source. So about 70% of our general fund revenues come from sales and use tax. There's more details about these revenues in your budget book, and we can answer any questions that you may have. One that I always like to point out, not necessarily for city council, but for the public, is you look at that very small slice of the pie of property tax is 2%. 2% of our general fund revenues come from property tax. So it's not a very large, we have a question. Must be a burning question. No? Oh, okay. So that's about $1 million we're projecting for 2020. So $1 million out of $40 million in revenues comes from property tax. So it's not a very large revenue source. I'm always surprised when I'm out in public talking about this. People don't really realize that we don't receive much from property tax from our constituents. Yes, George.
Is the revenue for the rec center in the services slice?
It is, yes. On the next slide, yep. So our next slide is kind of a trend analysis of kind of our financial health of the city, of the general fund revenue specifically. You see it goes back to 2010 all the way through what we're proposing through 2020. In 2010, we were just coming off the recession of 2008 and 2009. It took a while before we started realizing increases in revenues. About 2013 is when we really started seeing an increase again in revenues. And you can see it's been increasing every year since, which is always a great thing. The little orange, is orange up on that screen too? Yep. The little orange bar on top of 2014 and beyond, those are one-time revenues that we receive occasionally. And as an example, in 2020, that little segment of orange equates to about 1.4 million, and that's for building use tax that we're estimating that's above and beyond what we normally bring in an annual cycle. But we have some specific projects that we're potentially going to see next year that's going to bring in additional use tax. So we're showing that as a one-time because we don't see that every year, that amount of use tax. So I guess the story behind this chart is revenues are increasing at a pretty steady rate here in Wheat Ridge, and that's a good thing. The 2020 bar does again include the recreation center revenues, so that's why you see that jump a little bit there. Now we're going to focus on expenditures in the general fund. We are proposing a budget in 2020 of just over 39 million in expenditures. And then also transferring out of the general fund reserves to both the capital budget, and then 3.6 to the capital budget and 100,000 to our equipment replacement budget. So that would be total expenditures out of the general fund of $43 million. This is the 39 million is a 7.5% increase compared to this year's adjusted budget. But again, if you pull out the recreation center expenditures, which were not in this year's budget, we're looking at about a 5% increase in our general fund budget over this year. And let's see, the expenditures from the rec center fund are about 2.5 million that we're moving into the general fund. So that's included in that 39 million. Our revenues from that previous slide, we are projecting about just over $500,000 more in revenues than in expenditures. So that $500,000 more in revenues will go into the general fund reserves. So we are proposing to spend less than we're bringing in revenues. And let's see, so then that leaves us with an ending fund balance at the end of 2020 of just over $10 million. and an unrestricted fund balance of just about $7.5 million. And that equates to about 19.2% of general fund expenditures. And again, we are, your city council policy on unrestricted fund balance is 17% minimum. And what that difference is between the ending fund balance and the unrestricted fund balance, it's about 2.5 million. There's a certain amount of the money in that 10 million that has to be held aside for specific purposes. One of them is by state law, by TABOR, the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, we must hold a 3% emergency reserve, and that equates to about 1.2 million. So 1.2 million is considered part of our restricted fund balance. We also have PEG fees, public education government fees that everybody, if you have cable in your home, if you pay like 50 cents a month, I believe, and we get a portion of that, and we use it for the Channel 8 equipment in here. We have about 271,000 set aside, and that's in our fund balance. That has to be restricted for these expenditures only. And then our Fruitdale loan, remember we loaned money for the Fruitdale project. We did get a reimbursement of 1.5 million already, but we have a long-term loan with them still, which is just over $1 million, and that's shows up in our restricted fund balance. Now on to expenditures again, graphically. Hopefully you can see that. It's a little small. So this changed a little bit with since we moved in the recreation center. So these percentages have changed a little bit that you may have been used to seeing. But police department is still our largest expenditure in the general fund budget, about 30%. It's always falls about 30%. Parks and Rec, now that we moved the recreation center operations fund in there, has jumped up to number 2 at 20%. Public Works Department, 13%. Administrative Services, 11%. Central or General Government, 10%. General Government includes the City Council budget, City Clerk budget, City Treasurer, City Manager, Economic Development, and the City Attorney. What am I missing here? Central Charges is 8%. Central Charges is an account or a fund or a program budget we set up for costs that are across the city, across departments, such as our workers' comp insurance, our property liability insurance, our medical, dental, life insurance, postage, securities, expenses. And community development, 5%, and not to forget court over there is 3%. They've been maintaining a 3% budget for many years, right, Kirsten? And then also, we did a graph that kind of that shows the financial health of the city on our expenditure side also. You can see, obviously, there also is an increase in our expenditures along with revenues, and we are also showing some one-time expenditures in these years, starting in 2014. The one-time expenditure in 2020 that we're showing is just over $1 million, $1.1 million, and that is for all the tax increment finance payments that go to the Urban Renewal Authority. Those may be more than 1 year, but those eventually will go away once that debt's paid off. So I'm showing those. Those aren't a long-term expense. So I'm showing those as a one-time expense. Okay, so that's the general fund. We're going to move on to the 2E bond fund now, and let some other people jump in here in a second. First of all, I will go over the general numbers of our 2E bond funds. Again, the revenues in this fund, we're projecting about $6.4 million in 2020. And again, those revenues, majority of those are from sales and use tax. But we also are projecting to receive some reimbursements from, I think, mainly the city of Arvada for some of the work that is being done specifically up on 52nd Avenue and Ridge Road. Arvada has agreed to cost share, I think, 50% of that. So some of those revenues are reimbursements from the city of Arvada. We really only have 2 projects left for our 2E projects, at least on the expenditure side in 2020. And that's the Gold Line Station. So 54% of the $11 million budget next year is for the Gold Line Station, and 23% is for the Wadsworth project. We're wrapping up the Anderson Park project this year, so there won't be any more expenditures next year on that. And then the Clear Creek Crossing project, if you remember, $10 million was allocated from this fund for the Hook Ramp project, and we estimate to spend that $10 million this year. And actually, they're moving a lot slower than I expected, so there may actually be some of that $10 million spent next year. But if you also remember, that project is somewhere between 15 and 16 million is what the contract came in at. And the city has an IGA with the Longs Peak Metropolitan District where we are obligated to pay that difference. Anything above 10 million, the city has to pay until the district issues bonds so that they can pay us back. So we're hoping that the district's going to issue bonds mid-year next year, or the work won't get invoiced until those bonds are issued. So anything above $10 million, we did not budget for at this point. So we're going to have to play that a little bit by ear next year, and hopefully the district issues bonds, or we can dip into our city's reserves to pay anything above 10 million until those bonds are issued, and then we'll get reimbursed. And we can talk about that a little bit more too. So I want to turn it over to Steve Wynn, and Steve's going to talk about the Wadsworth project, expenses that are specifically in the 2E budget. The Wadsworth project is split between the 2E budget and the capital budget, but Steve's going to talk specifically about the 2E funds.
The portion for Wadsworth allocated for this project is about just over $3.5 million. Basically, this will serve as a local match to the grant project that, we're taking on. And out of this $3.5 million, it's encompassing professional services, right-of-way, and construction. We're not covering environmental this time because we completed that just recently, so we won't anticipate any spending on that. Again, it's back for, most of it's going to be paid for right-of-way and construction.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And then we'll turn it over to Ken Johnstone, and he's going to speak about the Wheat Ridge Ward G-Line Station projects.
Yeah, so it's fun to finally be spending some of our $12 million of allocation on real projects this year. So you can see some graphics of what some of those projects are. About $3 million towards the pedestrian bridge that connects the station platform to the south side of the tracks, and the development opportunities that exist in that area. And then the image below that is an image of the terminus of the multi-use trail that's proposing to connect from that pedestrian bridge down to the I-70 frontage road, where there are those two development opportunities at the two pond properties. We actually have a rezoning application in for the western of those two ponds that would tee that up potentially if approved for development. We're also spending $2 million on 52nd Avenue in partnership with the City of Arvada and Jefferson County, and we're also spending some money on Ridge Road to the east of our jurisdictional limits from Tabor Street, and then some intersection improvements at both Ward and Ridge Road and Ward and 52nd. So those are the major projects. There'll also be a plaza area at the terminus of the bridge on the southern side of the tracks. That's a little over $500,000 in expenditures as well. So those are all anticipated to be spent next year for approximately $8 million.
Great, thanks, Ken. And Steve is still up here, and we're going to now move on to the capital improvement program budget, the CIP budget. And I'll go over the overview first, and Steve will talk about the specific projects in there. But we're proposing a budget for the CIP of just over $18 million next year. That's, I think, the largest CIP budget since I've been here. That's primarily because of the Wadsworth project, and the revenues are just a little bit more of $18.4 million. We're projecting to get a good chunk of our grant money in 2020. But with that, I will, the next slide is up here, the fiscal health. I like throwing this in here too, because it just kind of shows you kind of the, I guess, I don't know if it's uncertainty, that's not the right word, but the inconsistency of the CIP budget. A lot of it's dependent on when funds are available, when grant funds become available, how much money reserves we have in general fund to transfer for CIP projects. So every year is quite different. As you can see, the blue line is the expenses for CIP projects, and the orange line again is the transfer we make from the general fund. You can see in 2020, it's blue line is very much larger than it has been in the past, and fortunately we were able to transfer a fairly large amount, $3.6 million, also from the general fund reserves, which is a large transfer, which we haven't been able to do in the past. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve, and he'll talk about what the major CIP projects are proposed for 2020.
Thank you, Patrick. First and foremost, that the $14 million point one, that's the biggest chunk we got for CIP. Certainly that is for the Wadsworth project. And this 14 million basically to receive the grant, federal money, and the 3.5 I just mentioned earlier in the 2E, we use that as a local match, so that's kind of all this total going to the Wadsworth project. And then that $1.8 million certainly will continue on with our preventive maintenance program that consists of crack seal, concrete rehab, and overlay. In 2020, I think we were planning on doing 44th Avenue from about Kipling over to Clare Creek. And Ridge Road, a portion of that, and certainly a number of selected local streets. For the 30th Avenue and Kipling, that's going to be budgeted for construction. We are working through the design right now. It's going to be a CDOT permit project because we are looking at to improve the intersection at 30th and Kipling, so certainly we need to involve CDOT in that. We're hoping to move forward and complete the design about mid-year and then go to construction by then. And that, right now, the estimate is at about $830,000. Then moving on to others, bridge maintenance. In 2020, we're looking at Youngfield Street to do a couple of maintenance items on that. That's going to be comprised of 2 items. That's going to be bridge joints rehab and also constructing the approach slabs. Again, those are a maintenance item to bridge, but this time we're focusing on Youngfield Street. And moving on down to gateway signage. I think sign replacement at 38th and Sheridan, I believe. I think that is planned for replacement.
I think this is the one out by Walmart in Youngfield, right?
This one is at 30th and Sheridan.
Oh,
It's one of them.
Okay, gotcha.
And I think it was Public Works Operation at the request to replace that. But we also looking at 2 locations on the west side of town. As you are aware, that shopping center, we're going in through improvements in various aspects. We're currently undergrounding the power lines out there, and we're continuing with that with one of the sign replacement right at 38th and Youngfield. The other location is right close to Clare Creek Crossing development. That is by 32nd and Zinnia. So those are the 2 locations that included in the 2020 program. I'm going to speak to a couple items here, and then I'll have Ali talk about one item. One is the sidewalk connection. We currently have a gap of about over 100 feet that needs a sidewalk connection. It resulted from a development that leaves a gap that we would like to build that and connect it up to Clare Creek. As we do with developments outside of its area, sometimes it leaves a gap that gives us opportunity to connect up the sidewalk. So this is the same effort we want to do to that. The striping maintenance, that's our annual program. We do have a lot of collectors on Arterial Street that typically the striping typically wears out. And we focus on street that is with all of the, mostly the marking is starting to diminish. And so we're trying to stay on top of that from a safety perspective. So we're spending $100,000 per year to do that. And now as we own more bike lanes and so on, and oftentimes they get worn out as well, so we focus on those bike lanes to make sure that those are well striped for users. Ellie, do you want to come up?
I'll just go over here, Steve, because you're going to be here for a while.
Oh, thank you. Gee, thanks.
Yeah, I'll just talk very briefly about the City Hall improvements that you see there at $107,000. We had a little over $400,000 budgeted this year as well. To make a number of improvements that have to do with security here at City Hall. And so while the plans have been completed for the initial security renovation, which includes the front area, the public area of the first floor admin and the public area of the second floor in planning and development and building, we also decided that it was time and it would behoove us and save us money to also look at how we reuse the dispatch space, since dispatch employees left the city and went and merged with JeffCom. That space is now available, and as you know, here at City Hall, we need more space for employees. So we'll have a little over $500,000 in total between 2019 and 2020 funds to go ahead and make those renovations for our employees. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. So we'll continue on with the ADA program. Typically, we receive about our budget about $50,000 a year, and pretty much we're focusing on upgrade handicap ramps, accessible, targeting high pedestrian areas. In this case, it's am I? Oops. Oh, okay. All right. Rewind a little bit, right? So the traffic signal master planning, in essence, is that our system has been in operation for years. It's very obsolete at this point from a technology standpoint and from a functional standpoint. So our thought and hope here is to do a master plan of it so that it would help us identify the needs and also maybe help us serve as a guidance for hoping for a multi-year upgrade. Certainly funding stream is not going, or even time-wise wouldn't allow us to do upgrade all at once. So it makes sense to identify multi-year so that hopefully we can upgrade the system in that fashion. As far as right-of-way update or aerial photography, we have two efforts. Hope for that is, one is to do a GIS update. Or GIS update last time was done in 2005, and we have implemented the system. We had staff in place, and we gained a major milestone, but that's quite old now and obsolete. So our next best effort is to identify what we got, what we need, and what about staffing needs. How do we go from here to support our future support of servicing GIS? And then the $35,000 of that is to do right-of-way correction. I think this is about our third or fourth year that we correct certain area of the city where right-of-way is has gone through a lot of changes, or it's created a lot of confusing land boundary disputes that sometimes it's not efficient or effective for us trying to administer the right-of-way needs out there. So that's part of the effort. The $75,000 budget for Clare Creek Crossing, in 2020, we still have segments of Clare Creek Crossing will be constructed. That's not a part of the QE, but rather the private development. We still need assistance in terms of construction management help, design review help to finish up that project. So we're budgeting that $75,000 hopefully to get that some assistance for 2020. Okay, now moving on to ADA again. As mentioned earlier, we budget $50,000 a year, hopefully to target high pedestrian area, and that's to be schools or any of the dense developed area that has more pedestrian use. Neighborhood traffic management program, again, that's an annual program that we have Petition Street to address traffic safety on that. And certainly the $35,000 comes in handy when we are able to process a street that have gone through and meet their petition process. That's when we can help them to do permanent treatment. Clare Creek Master Plan update, certainly recently they found that a different flow in the creek that kind of represent a flood condition and has been changed. And so we want to update that with the new flow regulatory so we figured out where the limits are and what kind of mitigation project that we could do from that. And next year, we're proposed to increase a little bit budget for neighborhood streetlight program. I think historically been budgeted at $10,000, but we do have a specific request on this one neighborhood that's going to go higher than $10,000. So we're proposing to go to $25,000 to take care of that neighborhood. That is up. No, that's up north. Miller is operating the budget in the operational budget, which I made sure that it's already been addressed or included. And then the 20,000 City Hall parking lot, the City Hall is in good shape, but, you know, you can see the surface is pretty oxidized, and it definitely need a surface treatment. And there's several areas where you find that alligator concrete, failed concrete, and also asphalt that could fall apart. So that's part of the City Hall maintenance parking lot. We'd like to take care of it next year. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick question back to the neighborhood streetlight program. Is that lights or is that traffic lights? Is that
Those are street lights.
street lights? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So lights for when it's dark out.
Correct. Karen, yeah.
So $15,000 is budgeted for a workstation at the Anderson Building. So when the facility was renovated, office space was not included. And we are trying to operate the facility as a recreation center, providing the level of service that our patrons expect. And therefore, we'd like to have a full-time presence in the building to provide general oversight, safety, customer service, all those things. And we've identified a space that would have a minimal impact on patrons and a minimal cost for just walls, lighting, and some ductwork.
Thank you, Karen. And those are all the proposed projects for 2020. The next slide shows 2021 and beyond. City Council doesn't adopt those years, but these are part of the 10-year CIP budget. We're showing about a $3 million annual transfer from the general fund every year in the out years, and about anywhere between $2 and $3 million for annual preventative street maintenance. 19 million more for the Wadsworth reconstruction project through 2022, so 2 more years. And then every year throughout the 10-year program, we have money planned for drainage projects, bike pedestrian improvements, more ADA improvements, more street lights, bridge maintenance, the neighborhood traffic management program, and of course our street preventative maintenance program. So that's the CIP budget. Now we're going to move on to speak about 3 other major special funds, so the Open Space Conservation Trust and Recreation Center, and Karen will take those.
So first I'll talk about the Open Space Fund. So for 2020, we have projected revenues of a little over $2.2 million with total available funds just over $3.1 million. Proposed expenditures at just over $2 million, leaving the ending fund balance just over $1.1 million. And open space revenue sources include Jefferson County open space tax, which is approximately $1.2 million, developer fees at $778,000, and an anticipated Jefferson County local government grant for the Clear Creek Trail in the amount of $250,000. And it's important to note that there is a restricted fund balance associated with the Ward Road station improvements in the amount of $305,732. And this represents park fees in lieu of land. These funds are not typically restricted, but they are in the case of the development projects specific to the Ward Road station, and will fund a multi-use trail and other park amenities in that area. So within the Open Space Fund, $900,000 is budgeted for the Green Park development, which is located at 38th between High Court and Upham Street. And I believe everyone here is probably familiar, but for those who are at home, this project includes a plan for an urban plaza and a green open space for community events, farmers markets, festivals, movies in the park, and more. And this project will activate the existing green space, as well as consider elements along the streetscape to activate 38th Avenue. $500,000 is budgeted for trail maintenance and repair, and the areas identified for 2020 are Prospect to Westbridge, trail drainage at Harlan, and asphalt east of Wadsworth. $100,000 are budgeted for the open space master plan to serve as a vision for the future open space planning and prioritizing. $25,000 is budgeted for open space improvements, and this includes the Bayou Ditch culvert replacement on the west side. and $25,000 is budgeted for parks maintenance projects, and these are small projects that arise throughout the year, such as landscape improvements. And finally, it's important to note that there are 8 positions that are funded through the Open Space Fund. So next, I will update you on the Conservation Trust Fund. For 2020, the projected revenues are $340,950 with an ending fund balance just over $42,000. Conservation Trust Fund revenues are generated from the State of Colorado Lottery. And within the Conservation Trust Fund, currently $500,000 is budgeted to begin Prospect Park Phase 2. Specifically, we're looking at completing the replacement of the pavilion and then the parking area surrounding that pavilion next year. $175,000 is budgeted for recreation center maintenance projects. Some examples of these projects include sidewalk concrete replacement, parking lot crack seal, carpet replacement in the children's pavilion, a freezer replacement in the ballroom kitchen, refinish of the wood floors in aerobics and racquetball, and various other projects. $100,000 is budgeted for a new playground at Bonnie's Park, which is located at West 37th Avenue and Upham Street. And $36,950 is budgeted for resurfacing projects. So specifically, we're looking at Panorama tennis and basketball courts, as well as crack repairs at Applebacher Tennis, Anderson Basketball, Fruitdale Basketball, and Paramount Basketball. You're next.
Thanks, Karen. We'll briefly talk about the Recreation Center Fund. As we mentioned before, we're proposing moving forward to eliminate this fund and incorporate the expenditures and revenues into the general fund. We are showing that at the end of 2019, there'll be potentially reserves left in that fund of about $70,000. If that is the number, no matter what the number is, that those funds will be transferred to the general fund next year. But you can see, even moving the revenues and expenditures into the general fund, there is a deficit in the amount of revenues that the Recreation Center generates and the amount of expenditures. So for 2020, we're showing just about $320,000 of expenditures in excess of revenues that are generated from that center. And we can speak more to that later. But beyond that, we'll move on now to some additional budget strategic priorities that show up throughout the budget. And we've broken those down into several different categories. First of all, with economic development, there's several large expenditures in the budget we want to make sure you and the public are aware of. But for specifically under economic development purposes, we have $300,000 going to the Urban Renewal Fund for their operating expenditures. We have $1.1 million in tax increment financing this year, and I didn't put those in my notes with this year, but if you have questions about which projects those are, we can talk about that. But those are for the backfill of the Walmart site, the Kipling Ridge project, the Corners project, and there's a couple smaller ones in there, but we can speak about those. Swiss Flowers. $180,000 to Local Works for public events that we believe is part of our economic development strategy to increase activity and increase traffic through our city. And then they also do Live Local events of $41,500, which gets people out throughout our community into different businesses. $50,000 to Local Works for our Building Up Business Loan Program, and $90,000 to our Wheat Ridge Business District Grant Program. Our next kind of major category of other strategic priorities are for different types of city functions. We do have $70,000 budgeted next year for security initiatives throughout the city, which include security guards, and we are going to start using armored bank services currently, and in the past we've been using employees to take money to the bank every evening, which is not a very safe practice, and so we're gonna hire an armored service. $58,000 for new and upgraded security cameras throughout city facilities. $40,000 for the citizen survey. We do that every other year. 2020 will be our next year. $19,200 for online public hearing software, and we're going to speak about that at our October 7th study session. So it's called People Speak. City of Lakewood uses it, and they're going to come in and demonstrate it for us. Historic building management and maintenance, we have just over $83,000 budgeted for our different historic buildings. Police department wellness and resiliency is becoming more and more of an issue, and we actually cut this budget a little bit, but we had more in there, but our acting police chief thinks we have other ways to deal with it, but we need to find ways to make sure that we're taking care of our police employees who deal with a lot of stuff on a daily basis that a lot of us don't have to. And we're going to continue in our large item pickup program, which is a small expense of $5,000. A few other strategic priorities, which City Council talked about at a study session a couple weeks ago. These are contributions to some of our external agencies, to local works. Well, no, these aren't what we talked about a couple weeks ago, but these are to some of our outside agencies. Local Works, $33,000 for our TLC program, which is a partnership with our police department. It's a proactive code enforcement project. $100,000 to the Carnation Festival, and we do budget additional monies for the Carnation Festival for the overtime that's incurred by our police department, public works, park staff. We have $27,500 in there for that, and for some barricades. And the outside agency program, which did report to City Council a few months ago or a few weeks ago, they proposed a budget of $133,800 for numerous funding for numerous different nonprofits throughout the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Greg Knutson, our Public Works Operations Manager, and he's going to talk about our fleet.
Oops, sorry. Thank you, Patrick. As always, our replacement requests are in compliance with the council-approved guidelines. And this year, we are requesting $815,000 total vehicle replacement, which includes a new snowplow, a tandem snowplow, and all the equipment and lighting that goes with it. We're also requesting a new backhoe, a new John Deere backhoe. I think the one we have now is a 1996 version, and it just got out of the shop today, actually, from repairs, so it's back online. We're also requesting a new vehicle SWAT transfer van, which at this point I'll have Dave Pickett get into with respect to the details of that.
We have an IGA with the Lakewood Police Department regarding SWAT services. Our combined team, the West Metro SWAT team, handles high-risk issues both in Lakewood and Wheat Ridge. So our agreement with them is that we will shoulder 20% of large item expenditures. They had some Tabor money come in. One of the issues that we have had over time is inability to move our staff from one point to another in a ballistically safe manner. So Lakewood Police Department purchased a ballistic vehicle called a Bearcat, and they bought it in total with money they got from a Tabor exclusion, which left us with 20% obligation and no way to fulfill it. However, we did have a need, which is, although the Bearcat is really important for tactical maneuvers, it doesn't really transfer officers from one place to another in a safe manner. You can't put very many people in it. So we've scoped out a ballistic transfer van, and that's what this vehicle is, and that expenditure equals our 20% obligation to Lakewood.
We also are requesting 8 replacement vehicles. They're all administrative sedans, and quickly I'll just break that down, what those are. 3 of those are, I should say, we do have patrol vehicles that we are replacing. Out of those 8 police patrol vehicles, 3 of those at $60,000 apiece. That $60,000 also includes $18,000 of upfit costs for lighting, all the equipment that goes into the vehicle, the technology, decals, those types of things. And as we had the speaker earlier suggest, we do have hybrid vehicles that we are requesting to be replaced. Older Honda sedans, I believe we have in investigations. We have 2 of those that we're going to replace. And then a 3rd hybrid sedan in PD in the training and PR division. And then there is a sedan that's going to be replaced in Parks and Recreation in the Active Adult Center. And last but not least, we'll be getting our first electric sedan for the city that will be replacing a sedan in the engineering division for. So with that, Mary Ann was going to speak to the charging station and the grants that she's been working on to accommodate that vehicle.
You may recall that the Sustainability Committee, Sustainable Wheat Ridge, they received a grant for their city's first charging station at a municipal facility. So that's going to be installed at the rec center this fall. In addition, they're going to be applying again for a grant out of the same grant operations program, the Charge Ahead Colorado, and they're also looking to do it for City Hall and potentially additional locations as well. So we are hoping to have a couple of different charging stations located for our residents in the coming years.
And a potential vehicle too. They're going to apply for a vehicle too.
They're going to apply for a vehicle as well, and that covers, I think, about $9,000 toward an electric vehicle should we receive it. Thank you.
Okay, I think Ally's up. We're going to move on to our staffing and benefits section of the budget. And was I going to do positions? You going to do positions? I am. I'm introducing. Yeah. So I'll introduce it, and then I think we turn it over to the department directors to speak about each of the positions that they're requesting. But we're only going to requesting 2.75 FTEs for 2020. But I did want to give you a caveat on that the police department had asked for a couple positions, but Mr. Pickett and I decided to hold off on those until there's a new chief on board and to reevaluate those positions to see which ones are needed. I believe they were asking for a crime prevention officer and a code or a school resource officer. So we would like to take some more time to reevaluate those once a new chief is on board, and then potentially bring that back mid-year to maybe potentially ask for if needed at that point. But at this point, we're asking just for 2.75 positions and FTEs, and the first 1.75 are in the community development department. I'll let Ken speak to those.
Thanks, Patrick. The City Council is, I think, well aware that earlier this summer, the NRS update, the 2019 Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy update, was adopted by City Council by resolution. On July 22nd was the meeting that occurred. One of the key recommendations from that document was to really embark on a very active community engagement effort at a neighborhood scale. The document further recommended that in order to achieve that goal, that 2 additional staff persons be hired. At the August 5th study session, staff presented an implementation action plan for the next 2 years regarding the NRS, and in the consensus motion that was passed at that meeting to move forward on that implementation plan, it also included a proposal that we fund the first of those 2 positions in 2019. So staff has drafted a senior neighborhood planner description, and we're circulating it around internally, but should be able to have that position on the street in short order. And then the second recommended position is proposed to be funded in the 2020 budget, and that would be a community engagement specialist, a little bit different position that we'd use both for this effort as well as for some broader community involvement efforts that we want to embark on in 2020. The .75 position is for a landscape inspector program manager. We've had a kind of a pilot landscape inspection program that has worked on most of our commercial properties and larger residential properties to ensure that they're maintaining compliance with approved landscape plans. We think it's been a real successful program. We've been funding it with a temporary seasonal intern at about $25,000 a year, but we've had in the staffing plan a proposed .75 FTE for 2020, and we're proposing to include that this year to make that a full-time staff position to keep that inspection program moving forward. We think it aligns well with the community and city council's goals of beautifying our city and our primary corridors. So we really think that's an important effort to keep going.
Thank you, Ken. We're proposing in the 2020 budget to hire a part-time payroll specialist. So, payroll technician. So back in 2017, my predecessor, Heather, wonderful Heather, worked with a consulting firm to look at our small but mighty finance team. And at that time, there were two separate divisions. They were accounting and sales tax. You might remember seeing that in the budget broken out. And she and Patrick and the staff worked really hard to implement the majority of those recommendations. And it's now one division functioning really well. Again, a small but mighty 6-person team getting a lot done. I know our treasurer is nodding and smiling. Acknowledging that. Thank you, Chris. But one of the recommendations back in 2017 was to take a really good look at our payroll function. It was a real deficiency that there was very little backup to that very critical function. And so we addressed that in 2019 by piloting a part-time, intermittent, sort of seasonal, if you like, temporary employee in that role. And the pilot's gone really well. She's been working about 20 hours a week. She's managed to execute payrolls independently, which allows the supervisor to then focus on process improvement, obviously continuing to oversee that function, but also the ever more challenging federal and state reporting. And so in the 2020 budget, we're proposing that we make that position a permanent position, still part-time, 20 hours a week, but obviously this is a position worth investing in given the amount of critical and confidential information that they're responsible for maintaining. And the good news is it's a very minimal cost to offer medical benefit and paid PTO and pension, basically, and it's offset by the money that we were spending on the seasonal employee. It's a few $1,000s. Thank you.
And then one last part-time position, .5, is the homeless navigator, and I'll let Marianne speak to this position.
Thank you. So due to the rising issues with those experiencing homelessness in Jefferson County, what we've been working on regionally is coming up with a strategy to work on homelessness. So one of the issues that we're considering and that we're working toward is coming up with a regional homelessness navigator system. So what this would entail is navigators who work for each of the Jefferson County municipalities as well as Jefferson County itself, and they would be working to provide support to each of the municipalities and work collaboratively with each other, since obviously it's a regional issue and it doesn't stay local to Wheat Ridge. So what we're proposing is a .5 FTE for a homelessness navigator. What they would be doing is providing direct services, stabilization services, working directly with Jefferson County Human Services, and also working with the Jefferson County Homeless Coordinator. This position would be funded out of the Crime Prevention Fund. It would also have a small portion of what we would call urgent stabilization funding. So for example, this would be for people who are maybe about to get evicted, but maybe a small portion of funding would be able to keep them in their current home. So without starting the actual homeless process. So that is our recommendation, is the half-time FTE for the homeless navigator position. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. And then Allie will come back up and wrap up our staffing and benefits section. And we're getting close to the end.
Isn't this fun? So this chart just shows you sort of the history the last few years since 2017 in terms of staffing by fund. So our total proposed employee count is 239.125. I always think that's really funny when we think about 1.25 of a person, employees across all funds. Just a little bit more about about staffing, so employee benefits and highlights. As council is well aware, here at the City of Wheat Ridge, we reward high performers. So our compensation adjustments each year are based on a performance-based. And so this is year 8 of that. And in particular, we reward employees for executing their jobs with competence and also following the city's core action values. Does anyone know what action stands for? I'm looking at the staff now. So good job. Accountability. Thank you, Councillor Dozeman. Very good, yes. Accountability, change, teamwork, integrity, opportunity, and now. And as a new employee here at the city, I have to say, I just love working in an organization where this is front and center of the work we do every single day. I think we were just doing a really good job of that. So historically, the city has undertaken a market analysis every 2 years, where we actually go out and do a good market analysis of the Denver-Boulder area. And 2019 was an off year, but we were concerned about some areas of our business, so we did engage our consultant, that's Candy Johnson of Compensation Studio, to help us take a little bit of a dive to figure out what's going on in some particular areas. As you know, this is has been a very challenging and tough job market. Employment here in Colorado is at a low of 2.9%. And it's tough. It's tough to hire and retain good people. So in addition to our pay for performance allocation, we are proposing that we do increase pay for steps 1 and 7 in our police department. So we took a look at the Denver-Boulder market for PD and realized that the City of Wheat Ridge is falling behind in that area. Our strategy is to hold steps 2 through 6 stable. Those employees will still, as they are promoted to their next step, again, for their work in good policing and also in upholding the city's core values, they will all be eligible for increases, but we're not proposing to actually increase those particular steps themselves. We want to attract good people, so we want step 1 to be attractive, and we want to retain them, so we want step 7 to be attractive. And again, we'll look at next year at a full market analysis. That impacts sergeants, so we propose increasing the minimum to the sergeant pay as well. So in addition to PD, we do have a number of civilians, about a quarter of our civilian workforce are high performers whose annual increases have not really kept up with the market. So these are folks who are receiving increases for their exceptional performance. But if you think about how, again, in our tough economy, the market has moved quite substantially, these are employees that may have been with the city for quite some time, but are still kind of clustered and, if you like, compressed around in the early section of the range. So we've taken a look at every single employee to make sure that if they're a high performer and if they've been here with the city for some time and have some tenure, that they are being paid at market. Moving our market ranges every year doesn't necessarily, we're not necessarily paying market if we're not moving the employees into that market. So all this to say that in 2020, we are proposing that we spend $830,000 on everything I've just described. So that's increasing steps 1 and 7 for the police, increasing sergeant pay, and then sort of decompressing, if you like, or making sure that we're equitably paying our high performers within the organization, and then, of course, giving those that deserve it a raise. Additionally, we do have increases built into our part-time pay plan. You might recall that 2020 is the final year of the minimum wage increase that will now go to $12 an hour, and there's a real impact, and I'm looking at my colleague Karen here in Parks and Recreation. There's a big impact there. Let's see here. In addition to looking at the police pay, we did have a look at the market for retirement in PD. You might recall that last year, this council funded a civilian increase, where now the city contributes 6% to civilian employees, and the employee contributes 4%. In the police department, sworn employees do not contribute to Social Security. So the city pays in 10% and the employee pays in 10%. We are about 1.5% market. here in Wheat Ridge for PD pension. And so we are proposing a 0.5% increase in 2020 for our sworn colleagues here at the city. And then depending on available funding and how the market behaves next year, this could be something that we look at over the course of the next 2 years to make up that 1.5% delta. We are expecting a medical premium increase next year. You might recall that in 2019, the city of Wheat Ridge did not experience a medical premium increase, which was very rare in this market. We are expecting 4.6% next year, which frankly, and looking at how what our colleagues are expecting in other cities, this is about in line, if not a little less. Our wellness program, our very active wellness program, is definitely paying dividends in helping us keep our premiums low. And then finally, we are proposing a switch in our workers' compensation insurance provider. We're currently with CIRSA for both property casualty and workers' compensation, but we've gone out and taken a good look at this, and we're proposing to move to Pinnacle Assurance. It will save the city money. And also, we do expect a much higher level of service. So we expect to save quite a lot of staff administration time, and we expect this to be a much better experience for our injured workers. They offer a lot of support in return to work. They have nurses on call. They have a number of providers. They're very much in touch with them. The nurses spend about 80% of their time in the field with these providers. So we're really excited about a shift to Pinnacle Assurance in 2020. Thank you.
Do you know whether we are part of any group discount program with Pinnacle Assurance?
Group discount program.
You know, being part of having a good safety modifier and being part of a group that would provide us a dividend or discount at the end of the year based on our performance.
Well, that's all taken into account in our premiums. So in order to get our initial quote from Pinnacle, we did have to submit our loss, our records of loss, our claims, along with our payroll. And I'm really proud to say that we got an excellent XMOD factor, which did factor into, the current quote is about $100,000 less than our CIRSA premium for 2019. So it's quite significant. And again, for us, this is about also a level of service. As you know, we don't have risk management staff on site. And we expect that this could really help us achieve some efficiencies there. Thank you, Mayor.
Of course. Just a couple questions. This is the last year you guys have to put up with me on these questions. The percent for performance pay, what is the average percent that we're doing, across the board? What percent increase is that?
So employees are eligible from 0 to 5%, and our average has been about 3.5, just under 3.5 of it.
Right. And then one other question on the medical benefits. If the premium is 4.6%, and I know we all experience this because we all work, is there any of that increase that is being, even a tiny portion to the employee? So even if it was a 4.6, that the employee would maybe see a 0.6 increase in what the premium they're required to pay.
You want me to start? We talked about that, and we considered that. In the end, we decided not to this year. It's the 4.6%. I think it's a $40,000 increase to the city, and with the savings that we're seeing from workers' comp of close to $100,000, we decided not to put it on the city, the employees this year.
Mr. Matthews?
I've been out of the job market or retired for some time now, but I can tell you that in the past, the companies I worked for, we've used the Pinnacle option, and it worked out very well for us in the construction industry, at least. And I would offer a challenge to you to think about for the coming years. It's my understanding you're still with Kaiser?
Correct.
And I've never had a good experience with Kaiser. I consider them the Kmart of insurance companies. And I would challenge you to find a way, even if perhaps you maybe had to give up an FTE somewhere down the road or something, but I would certainly support you're looking into a insurance program that would better provide for our employees. I'd be willing to even dish out a little extra money for that. So just a challenge for the future.
Thank you, Councilor Matthews. Yeah, we've actually been chatting with our benefits broker, IMA, about is next year the year to really dig into that and go out to bid, and I certainly appreciate that support.
There's also a lot of employees that enjoy Kaiser. We used to have two plans in the city, Kaiser, and then a separate Aetna or whatever, where you a PPO, or you could go anywhere you want. We always had 50% employees always chose Kaiser and 50% chose the other firms. So we were always struggling. Do we get rid of one or the other?
Whatever your folks are happy with.
But that's a problem. It's 50-50. So it's like, I think it doesn't matter what we do, you're going to upset half of our employees. But we're struggling with, we would like to provide options, more options. The problem is a lot of companies won't, and Kaiser also, they won't, we're a small enough group, employee group, that they won't sit alongside another company because, especially with our city, our employees split 50-50 down the line. They want more than 50% of our employee base. It's not profitable for them, I guess, but I hear you. We'd love to provide more options with that for sure. And it's been a while.
You kind of answered my question with the choices. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who like Kaiser. And I think, you know, I'm used to having choices, but it's a bigger pool of people, so.
Okay, wrapping up here. Hang with us. Let's see, I think you were done, weren't you, Allie? Okay. So looking ahead at some of our short-term fiscal opportunities and challenges, and some of our long-term fiscal challenges that we're seeing this year. You know, I think there's more opportunities than challenges, which is great for our community, and I think it's been that way for quite some time here. And unfortunately, I think might be a few more, did I say challenges there? I think there's more opportunities now. But there are some potential challenges coming up that I would like to talk about. But some of our short-term fiscal opportunities that we're still seeing, and we have numerous redevelopment projects still in the works. The Corners at Wheat Ridge, of course, is fairly new, and there's still some retail development coming in there, and the apartments aren't done yet. So I think once the apartments are done, I think those retail tenants that are there are going to do even better. Clear Creek Crossing, we're not projecting any real significant development until probably 2021 out there, so we're not projecting any revenues in the 2020 budget for Clear Creek Crossing. The Wheat Ridge Ward Station, it's not going to be a retail haven, a sales tax base necessarily for the city, but I think there's some opportunities we're getting now that the train is finally running. We have some housing development coming in. We're getting a lot of interest. We have several retail type places looking at some sites as we speak. Kipling Ridge is still doing strong. The Sprouts development is Kipling Ridge. There's one vacant site there that has been sold, and they're looking at bringing some retail into that site. None of that revenue has been projected. The West End 38, which is at 38th and Upham, that includes about 8,000 square feet of retail. They don't project probably having anything significant on until 2021 also. It might be open by the end of next year, but probably not significant retail-wise or sales tax-wise, so no revenues projected off of that. And then also when those apartments come in there also, I think our Safeway Shopping Center is also going to see some increases. There's a new owner of that center. They're putting some money, investing into the center, getting some new tenants in. So I think with the increase in density there with apartments, all those retail centers are going to do better. Applewood Shopping Center, we are projecting a full year of revenues, as I mentioned earlier, from the backfill of the Walmart in the 2020 budget. But there's also a few other pads out there that we are not projecting revenues for yet. But you know, they won't be hugely significant. But in a couple of years, there could be 2 or 3 other retail opportunities that could increase our revenues in the Applewood Shopping Center. And then our short-term fiscal opportunities, again, multifamily townhome development that we've been seeing, and Ken can speak to this more if you'd like, but as you all know, some of you may not like, some of our community may not like, we're seeing quite a bit of development in the community, but we are also seeing a lot of revenue coming off of those developments, both from the initial building use tax and fees, but also from those new residents who will be shopping in the city. I think that's going to be good for the city. So for the Hobby Lobby, Home Goods, Ulta, and Sierra Trading Post, and the Colorado, Hacienda, Colorado, again, we think all of those will be open by the end of 2019. We're budgeting about 1.1 million in 2020 for those establishments in sales tax. About 400,000 of that will go back to the URA, the Urban Renewal Authority, for those TIF agreements. So that's a good chunk of money that we've been missing for a couple of years after Walmart closed. And some more, I guess, more of a challenge, I think, a short-term challenge. There's a lot of talk about prediction of a recession coming. I think that the talk's getting louder. We've been hearing it for several years, honestly, but I think it's getting louder and louder. Chris is shaking his head. I've been hearing potentially second half of 2020, we could see something. You just don't know how hard it's going to hit, how bad it's going to be in Colorado, how bad it's going to be in Wheat Ridge. But it's something we need to take into consideration, and we did that in the 2020 budget. We're projecting a modest growth in sales tax of 1.5% increase in 2020. I think that's fairly modest. The good news is we can always take a second look at this mid-year. If something happens the first 6 months of the year and we need to make an adjustment, we can always do that, and we can cut back on expenses. We've done that in the past. So I think we just need to keep a close eye on the budget in the next year if there is a recession or a slowdown. So, and I just spoke to this, so our long-term fiscal challenges, again, the recession, how much of an impact is it going to be if it comes, and for how long will it last? Ken and I discussed this, the second bullet point, a little bit earlier today, but we both feel that kind of the peak development in Wheat Ridge has kind of come and maybe passed a little bit. And what we mean by that is a lot of the kind of low-hanging fruit, the easier stuff to get done during this retail cycle may have happened. You look at a lot of our major corridors and major corners have been developed or are underway of being developed. That doesn't mean there's a lot still can't happen, and there's a lot of opportunity is still in Wheat Ridge, but those other opportunities may take longer, they may be harder. So we may not see as much of a significant growth that we've been seeing over the last few years. Long-term fiscal challenges, always, our CIP budget, we always struggle a little bit every year to make sure that we have enough funding for CIP. We don't have a sustainable funding source necessarily for that. We've been getting some grants, which is great, but just to take care of the annual preventative maintenance and such, that money comes from general fund reserves, and so we're balancing priorities against general fund operating expenses against our CIP projects. Recreation Center, as we spoke to a couple times recently, that building is it 20 years old now? Yeah, 20 years old next year. Yeah, 20 years old next year. I still think it looks amazing, but and we hear that all the time. But that's because we're keeping it up, and as long as I'm here, I'm going to make sure they keep it up because that keeps our enrollment up, and it's getting older, and there's going to be more things that need replaced and fixed. Our last two HVAC replacements were covered by insurance because of hailstorms, so I think we've been a little lucky. And as you saw earlier from Karen's budget presentation in the Conservation Trust or Open Space Conservation Trust budget, we put $175,000 next year to help with maintenance projects at the Recreation Center. And beyond the Recreation Center, pretty much all of our municipal facilities are lacking, are old. We've outgrown most of them. There's safety issues in a lot of them, and it's something that we need to really start taking seriously. I think we've literally converted the last closet in this building to an office space. So it's a struggle to find the space that we need. And just to maintain this building is very inefficient. It was built in the early 70s with solar panels and taken off very, very quickly because solar panels in the 70s weren't all that great. So there's some inadequacies there in our facilities that we need to really take seriously. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Allie. She's just going to wrap up with kind of the budget process and next steps.
Thank you, Patrick. So just to sort of recap what we've done this year to date already with the budget is you heard regarding the outside agency program back in June. And that the dollars that you heard about and that were approved are included in this budget at $133,800. We offered 2 specific opportunities for public comment here in front of you at City Council meetings. The first on July 8th, we did not hear from any citizens, and on the 12th, we did hear from one citizen who talked about the importance of the neighborhood revitalization strategy and moving ahead with those positions. And that citizen also requested that we hire at least a part-time sustainability coordinator. Back on August 26th, our agency partners came in to present, and you guys had quite a bit of discussion and settled on some numbers to include in this proposed budget. So I'm pleased to say that the numbers you settled on are indeed in the 2020 proposed budget. And just to remind you, that's $515,025 for local works, $90,000 for the Wheat Ridge Business District, $100,000 for the Carnation Festival, and $25,500 for Sustainable Wheat Ridge. So this evening, we'd like to answer any questions that you have. We're asking for a consensus on the proposed 2020 budget, and then we look forward to coming back to you on October 14th, where there will be, of course, a public hearing, our hopeful adoption of the 2020 proposed budget, and the certification of our property tax mill levy. And with that, we are ready and anxious to answer any questions you might have. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Patrick and Ali, for a great presentation with your team. We'll throw this open for more questions from council. Mr. Keeter.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to commend staff walking in to the conference room a couple weeks ago or a week ago and seeing the big thick binders. It was a little intimidating, and I'm impressed both by how comprehensive the information is, but also how organized and readable, and the effort that just went into making it understandable. Again, I'd like to commend you on that effort. I did have one question. Also a week ago, the Jefferson County Sheriff was in and talked about the draconian cuts that may happen specifically to law enforcement and the Attorney General's office in the county if Proposition 1A does not pass. Have you anticipated any increased costs, either directly or indirectly, to the city if those cuts actually do end up having to be enacted if the measure doesn't pass?
We'll have our interim chief speak to that.
Unfortunately, there are services that the county provides that the city cannot replicate. The most important of that is jail services. So, as you'll recall from the sheriff's talk, he's looking at closing the entire 7th floor of the jail and reducing municipal beds to 0. We have no alternative for that. We have no potential alternative for that. When you're talking about the district attorney cuts, unfortunately, in the criminal justice system, there's a very stark separation of powers that are associated with that. We have no prosecutorial powers at all. We can guide some low-level offenses into municipal court. However, they are then impacted by the reduction of options to come with the closing of the jail. Now, obviously, jail is not the only option, and we are fortunate enough in Wheat Ridge to have a probation service, which a lot of cities don't offer. But we really don't have an opportunity to backfill some of that money and allow continuity of those services. They just go away.
Just a quick follow-up. So I was also interested in indirect costs. So if the county has to put a bunch of people on the streets that it normally would be incarcerating, does that increase the workload on the police department? Is there greater concern about recidivism and that could result in increase in crime overall?
So that is a great question. When you take a look at, again, what the sheriff said, the order from the chief judge was that they could reduce bed space by releasing anybody who had served at least 50% of their sentence. So you are exactly correct. That means that there is an increased population that may be interested in committing crime. Hopefully, we've been working in 2019 fairly understaffed, but we're very hopeful for 2020. And I'm hoping we can offset that if it occurs, but there is a potential.
Thank you. Additional questions? Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is regarding the homeless navigator position, the 0.5 FTE. What's that as far as a dollar amount?
So the position would be approximately $40,000, including the salary and benefits, and then there would be about $10,000 for that support funding that I discussed earlier. So 50 in total.
Thank you. One of my concerns about the homeless navigator position and seeing that there's other municipalities doing this is there appears to be several nonprofit organizations that, in my mind, would do a lot better job at coordinating this amongst different municipalities than compared to having each municipality have their own coordinator. So I don't know how far down the road this is as far as each municipality having their own coordinator, but in my mind, it would make sense to have one hub doing this as opposed to a bunch of different spokes.
So the way that this is currently being designed is that it would be working in collaboration with the organizations that do provide those services. So this would be more on the municipal side of it in terms of the logistics and having the authority to make certain decisions. And then also being able to work, with the city managers, working with the county, but using the ancillary services to support the position as well.
I guess my other concern here is that by defining a homeless navigator position, we're indicating that we have somewhere to navigate them to. And based on the point-in-time survey in the 2019 survey of homelessness in Jefferson County, there was like 435 individuals that were identified as homeless. And the number of beds that we have in comparison to that is woefully inadequate. And so by navigating them, where are we navigating them to?
That's a great question. So part of it would be providing services for them to potentially get transportation to Jefferson County, the Human Services building. So right now we have people who aren't even able to get there physically. It's also to be able to provide the stabilization funding I mentioned earlier, which would be great for preventing the homelessness from even occurring in the first place. It also would be working with the police departments, it'd be working with the agencies and the nonprofits to see what we could provide there as well. So it'd be a lot of collaboration. There's no perfect answer, there's no one solution, but it would be able to provide more direct field services from a municipal perspective that is unique to each municipality for their needs.
Okay. I just think it's not necessarily the issue of navigating the city's services that individuals experiencing homelessness are necessarily claiming as their highest need. It's identifying resources and housing solutions. So in my mind, I think we need to look closer at that and understand how can a collaborative effort do a better job than us each individually as cities doing this. So.
Thank you.
So one of the challenges we face as the police department when dealing with people experiencing homelessness is displacement. And what that means is Arvada will do an initiative and displace people to Wheat Ridge. Wheat Ridge does an initiative and it displaces them to the county. So when we have people who are coordinating these activities and then also coordinating diverse nonprofits. It allows us to come together as a group and do more of a collaborative, maybe even holistic effort to try and move these people not just to some situation where they're not in our view, but perhaps getting to a position where they're a little bit more self-sufficient and not impacting our citizens and our businesses the way they are now.
Maybe to add to that, maybe just a little bit more too. Zach, you had great questions, and I'm not sure if how much we brought this back to you on an earlier basis, which is my fault. We should have had a bigger discussion about this, but the whole discussion of this Navigator program included the Heading Home program was at the table also with us in Jefferson County, and this is something they want very much because they don't feel like the Heading Home group has the capacity to provide all these services and navigation that we can help bring. So it's been very collaborative, I think, in reaching out to, it's not just the cities, it's all the third-party nonprofits in the county also. Is it going to make a dent in the problem? I hope it does. I don't think it's going to solve all the homelessness issues, of course, but
I guess that's what I would ask, is that we measure the size and the depth of the dent that is made by this half-time FTE, and that the number of individuals that have been interviewed or spoken with. If you look at the 435 estimated in the point-in-time survey and you divide that by the number of hours in a half-time FTE, that's like 3 hours per person for every homeless person in Jefferson County for that person to meet with them. So I would like to at least understand at the end of the year how many individuals experiencing homelessness were met with and what the outcome was, hopefully.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Hoppe.
Just kind of a follow-up question on that. As I understand, the homeless navigator, each municipality is going to have a homeless navigator to work with the county, and the county will be kind of the leadership on that, or where does the leadership come from, where the navigators go to?
actually it's going to be part of the organizational structure, including Heading Home. And the county navigator is not necessarily going to be the leader or the supervisor over this group, but they're going to work together. And the Heading Home program has a committee of folks put together, and we recently, Mark Devin, the city manager of Arvada, recently got on that committee. So I believe, and Mary Ann jump in this too, but I think the Heading Home organizational structure will be kind of the overriding leadership of that and providing the direction. And some good news recently, the Lutheran Foundation, which I think Zach's on, they provided a $20,000 grant to work with this Navigator program to provide space at Lutheran Medical Campus so that they can work together as a team there. So I don't know if the true leadership piece has been worked out on. Maybe they'll do a rotating thing, but did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think overall the municipal city managers and the mayors are going to be the overall leadership of it, to be the policy builders of this program. And then there's also going to be the Jefferson County coordinator, which is kind of going to provide general direction, because they're not going to be as much in the field services, but kind of like the overview and getting the temperature what the region needs. And then they'll be working with the agencies as well, and working with each municipality individually. And then to answer your question earlier, it's going to be pretty proportionate in terms of each municipality and the number of FTEs they're going to be providing. So I think last I heard, Lakewood was going to be having 2, Golden was going to be having a half as well. So it's all going to be proportionate to the population of each municipality.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So last year, sustainability coordinator was under 2020, and it got now pushed to 2022. While it was under 2020 as a half-time, and I see that it's been increased to a full-time in 2022, I would like to see if we can find support for a half-time sustainability coordinator, and that would be approximately $42,000 in benefits. Now, the sustainability group has put together a lot of stuff, and Mary Ann's been helping them with a lot of that, but we really need someone who is an expert in the field who can help us kind of onboard the Sustainable Neighborhoods program. And so I would like to ask council to consider adding a half-time sustainability coordinator to this year's budget.
Discussion on that item?
Can I, yeah, discussion.
Mr. Pond?
Yeah, I'm certainly open to the conversation and do recall the past couple of years of conversation. But, you know, I would like to more or less hear how people are feeling about the rest of the request within staffing. I find it to be sound, and I support what's in here. So I wouldn't want to give something up inside of this necessarily in order to gain this, which is not to diminish the importance of the sustainability efforts and the need of this coordinator. But I do believe that the neighborhood and community development things have been pretty soundly showing up as priorities and needs for us. So I just want to make, you know, that's my thought on that. You know, if so I don't support it by reductive measures against what's been proposed. I do support the conversation and would consider the additional 42,000.
Ms. Dozeman?
So I guess I had a question of whether that was a trade-off, because I know we had discussed having a sustainability coordinator, and is it that we prioritized having a homeless navigator and then the NRS coordinator? Is that kind of where the trade-off was as far as staffing?
Of why we didn't bring sustainability coordinator forward this year?
Why it got moved?
Yeah, personally, I support the position too. We were taking a look at to see how the programs would move forward under Mary Ann's assistance. And I think, as I said, when they came to present a few weeks ago, if you want to maintain what they're currently doing, I think they're doing a lot of great things. That can probably happen under Mary Ann, but if you want to take it to the next level, and I think they had a program or two that they were proposing they wanted to take to the next level, you'd need more help to do that. I can't give up that much of Mary Ann for that. So, but yes, of course, I think the priorities are, you went through this NRS process. I think those two positions are my priorities, so I would not want to give those up in this. But, and honestly, I don't have room for another employee in this building. We could figure that out. We may have to lease space or find space. We may have to do that with Kin's two new positions. We may have to find outside space for these positions. If there's maybe a contract situation or something that you could maybe bring a contractor on to do some of the sustainability work instead of an employee, or I don't know if that works. If there's anybody out there, I don't know, but we can definitely fit it in the budget. If it's a priority of City Council, we just need to hear that.
Ms. Hoppy?
Yeah, when I was speaking with the co-chairs of the sustainability committee, I did ask if a contractor would be something that we could consider. The problem is, or the concern, I suppose, is that really what we need the support for is the bringing up the Sustainable Neighborhoods program, which is the one through Lakewood. Having a contractor doesn't give you any congruency into your community, and they really would be working, face to face and hand in hand with the community. So that's why I was requesting, and this would be in addition to, I support all the 2020 staffing changes. This is something that I'm asking for in addition, not for in removal. So that's why we felt like it would be more effective to have an employee rather than a contract labor.
Thank you. Ms. Davis?
So I just want to echo the comments of council about the work on this. I know it takes a lot of work, and I actually love reading through it, so thanks for that. And that's for real, I'm not even kidding. And, because I'm a wacko. A couple things I wanted to just clarify, and I think, again, clarify this out loud, because even when I heard it, I was kind of like, ooh, you know, it's a little alarming to folks that might hear. But I think on one thing I wanted to clarify and just have staff confirm, with some of the renewal Wheat Ridge, with the expenditures and those types of things, I mean, we look at that as a $1.1 million expenditure, and we also look at it as this is an additional expenditure, which it kind of makes you go, ee, and you get squirmy over it. But really, that's based off of the revenues and the tax increment that we're gaining that we owe to some of these developers. It's not that we're handing someone 1.1 million to go and put lights on 38th or something like that. It's basically money that the city's generated that's going to some of our developments that we've committed to supporting as far as the but-for theory, you know, but for us doing some cleanup on 38th and Wadsworth, that development couldn't happen because they needed that corner section, which the EPA or whoever it was didn't like the laundry, the way they dumped previous
Laundry solvents
materials
in the soil?
in the laundry solvent industry. So I wanted to clarify that, and feel free to add anything.
Yeah, no, and thank you, Ms. Davis. That's something I always forget to clarify. And yeah, those are, they're not even revenues in, expense out, because we're bringing in more revenues than expense out. Because you're right, those projects are generating new sales tax and property tax for the city. As an example, the backfill of the Walmart, you know, we're getting close to $700,000 in new revenue that's going into the general fund, and an additional $300,000-ish that's being generated is going to the Urban Renewal Authority. So the city's getting $700,000, the Urban Renewal Authority's getting $300,000. So part of that 1.1 is that $300,000. So and that's the same with all of the TIF projects. Those are new sales tax that potentially wouldn't have been coming to the city without assistance from the URA.
Right, and without those developments.
Correct.
So it's just from those developments.
Yes.
So thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and I think this kind of is along the lines of Renewal Wheat Ridge, is kind of along the lines of sustainability, kind of along the lines of, I think we've had a previous Wheat Ridge resident bring it up. But I think the other thing we need to do, and find a place, and I don't know where, but it just came up, so I want to bring it up, is we do need to encourage some of these new developments to put charging stations in. I mean, it's going to be really disappointing that we have like 2, 3, 4 big developments, you know, that, as you said, our time has passed almost, that we don't get those guys to get at least one charging station in there. Even if it means the city of Wheat Ridge say, hey, we'll split it with you. You know, looks like we got this grant for, you know, over at the rec center or at City Hall, but, you know, what are we doing for some of our developments? Because I think that's a plus, and that should be done. Now, I remember in the Renewal Wheat Ridge plans, they did have a Tesla charging station, but I have later found out that that's only for Teslas, and not necessarily it's specific for Teslas. Not saying, hey, you can't park your Honda here, but it's basically, you know, rigged for just a Tesla, not necessary. So I don't know how we can do that. I don't know how we can do it in the budget. I think, again, urban renewal funding might be a way to do that. If the authority has a little extra money, then we could say, guess what, as an authority, we're gonna, if with your agreement, developers in these sections, we're going to go ahead and put a charging station in each one. I can bring it up to urban renewal tomorrow because we have a meeting, but I do think that would be, I mean, I think it's along the lines of the Wheat Ridge business districts and those improvement kinds of ideas, that we're more forward thinking and not being like, oh darn, too bad when this parking lot wasn't tore up that we didn't think of this. So I think something we really need to encourage.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's different ways we can do that. And, you know, our first example, our only example, I guess, at this point is the Fruitdale's project. And we participated and they got a grant. We helped them get a grant. They have 2 stations there, but, you know, I'm not sure if it's something we can throw in code. I suppose council could. You can do anything you want. You can put something in code. But we definitely could start with, even with some of the current developments that are going in, we can go back to those folks now and say, hey, would you consider, and, you know, we'll help you maybe with some grants or such. So I'd be happy to reach out to those
Yeah,
current ones.
especially considering we're seeing a lot of them tore up right now, so it would be perfect opportunity.
Great. Mr. Matthews?
Just out of curiosity, you brought up Fruitdale. Do we have any metrics on how much those stations are being used? Does anyone at Fruitdale actually have an electric car?
I don't know. Ken, do you?
The developer does. So I know they get some use when Jim or Susan are at the property. I don't know, but I can certainly find out.
It would just be interesting to see if it's getting used.
Thank you. Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the development of the green on 38th, it's in the open space funds, and so do restrictions on open space lands apply to this green development, or is it because it's in a mixed fund that those open space rules don't apply to that, or how does that?
The funds were not generated or originated from open space funds. It was a transfer from the general fund from the general fund reserve. So it was the undesignated funds. Essentially, we transferred them to the open space just because it would be a parks project and they would manage it.
So, but this wouldn't be considered open space or any open space funds used on this then?
Not at this point. The $900,000 that we have budgeted are all from general fund reserves. So not open space, correct? Okay. If anything else in addition goes to it, yeah, that's a good point, because I think the project is probably going to, as currently designed, and we have them scheduled for October 21st to come in. And to address the speaker's comments, I can't remember, maybe it was Vivian Voss. The school district is very much well aware of this and are working with us on this, and they actually like the idea. They have a similar arrangement with the city of Arvada for some school-owned property. Can't remember the name of the park. I don't know if you remember it. They've done the exact same thing. So yeah, we can't build anything on school property without their permission. And Fitzmaurice? Yeah, Fitzmaurice is a joint project in Arvada. And so they are currently, the school district is currently discussing this with the school principal to get final approval to see if this would work from them, and then also the upper management leadership at the school district to see if they're still supportive. So it's not a done deal. We don't know final from the school district, but.
And I bring that up because in the list of land uses within open space, it indicates that it shall be unlawful to use any sound amplification devices on open space lands or to permit unreasonably loud noises that would disturb others. So, and that's relationship to the open space rules. So, as long as we're not using those funds with that, should be okay.
Mr. Matthews?
While we're on this topic, have we discussed any of the terms yet of an IGA with Jefferson County? Do we have a 100-year lease or a 10-year lease or agreement or anything?
That's all still being negotiated and looked at. And again, we're planning to bring this to the October 21st study session if the school district is ready. And that's a discussion point I had with them because I knew there was concerns that this was not owned by the city and why would we put money into property that's not owned by the city. I said we would need some type of very long-term lease, I think, to get this sold. And they said that they don't think that would be a problem. But we haven't seen any draft language yet.
Thank you. Additional discussion. Oh, Mr. Matthews, please.
Okay, if that topic's died. The Kipling improvements, $830,000. Do we have enough design information from what's going to happen up at the intersection at I-70? Is there, in the meantime, is Kipling going to get widened? Do we have enough information to know that what we put into this won't be obsolete in 2 years or 5 years?
We do not have that information at this point, but I think first and foremost, The improvements at 38th and Kipling is to improve the traffic on the side. That is on 38th Avenue. The bigger picture of that is that we got to work through to improve the interchange at Kipling and I-70 first to resolve the outstanding traffic today. You can notice that some of the traffic you could go down as far as 38th. So in order for us to assess the residual traffic jam, we got to take care of the interchange first to figure out what's left for us to resolve. But back to the project at 30th and Kipling, the main effort there is to create additional turn lane to take care of traffic from 38th Avenue. That's the purpose of this project. So whatever we're doing will help that intersection, but it won't be a throwaway as far as addressing Kipling traffic.
Okay, because traffic does back up to 32nd.
Correct, correct.
And points south.
Again, we got to take care of the interchange.
Okay, so this is more of an
replacement.
east-west improvement.
Correct.
Than an all four directions improvement.
Yeah, again, the bulk of it is for 30th Avenue. We're gonna creating double left for eastbound and westbound left turn.
Okay, and CDOT's not going to be participating?
Not with this project. This is our own effort because of the increased traffic from the development and existing traffic that we try to take care of.
Thank you. Additional discussion, questions? Ms. Hoppy?
Well, then seeing none, I'm going to ask for a consensus to add a .5 sustainability coordinator to our 2020 budget.
We have consensus on that. Are there additional items that we'd like to discuss on the budget? Ms. Dozman?
So this is a question for you, Patrick. Do you really not have any room in this building for more employees?
Probably not. No, seriously. And I was very serious when I said we've probably converted the last closet. As Ally mentioned earlier, we have the dispatch space in the police department now that we don't have a dispatch center here, but that's going to hopefully relieve some of the crowding over in the police department. We're probably going to have to look for space for if we do hire these two positions for the NRS. We've been looking at across the street at what do they call it now? Strive, MCPN Strive, or potentially Local Works or Lutheran, or we're looking at all kinds of spaces. We really don't have the space right now. It's very crowded. Yeah.
So what about any of our other public facilities?
Well, yeah, we are looking at that
Parks and
too.
Rec?
Zach is our Parks Ops building, which is on by the outdoor pool. Zach is actually looking at some improvements to that building. There's some wasted space there. It's not the ideal office space, but with some improvements, we think we can add some space there. He primarily for his park staff because they're in a one-room shed, if that's being kind, right? And we have like 40 seasonals usually in the summer or so using one toilet and a space about this big for a lunchroom. So that's going to hopefully provide a better space for some of those seasonal employees, but it could also open up some space for employees like this that we need.
So when you discussed that being one of our challenges, is there a discussion around that? I mean, do you have any proposed solutions or thoughts on that matter?
You want to go into that tonight? I think we seriously need to start looking at a new city hall. Staff wanted me to have that discussion probably 20 years ago, but I thought we needed to get a lot of other things done in this community and a lot of other projects done, which I think we have, and proven that we're diversifying our sales tax base and we're having a strong community. My goal and my thought would be that once this bond initiative is taken care of and paid off, that a second bond initiative would include maybe some facility work in there. We've had some internal discussions. I guess I can say this publicly at this point. It's just a thought we've been having internally with the Lutheran campus moving most of their operations to the Clear Creek Crossing project, is there potential that we take over some of the buildings they vacate or build on some of the land that they don't use? And maybe there's a deal there that could be had. But that's about as far as we've gone.
Additional discussion? Would we entertain a consensus to move the budget then to the next step? Okay, let's move the budget forward.
Okay, we'll bring it back on October 14th.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. We have item number 2, staff reports.
Got a lot of staff here, so
so
any staff reports? I think we'll pass this evening. Yeah.
Okay. Then we will go to number 3, elected officials reports. I'll go hands and start with Ms. Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the community and Wheat Ridge High School for the Farmers 5,000. My children and I participated. I only got about the first mile, and I was carrying my younger son for most of it. So we decided to stop and wait for our older brother to finish, and then I walked him back on my back again. So yeah, but it was a lot of fun. I loved seeing the community come together. A lot of the community partnerships that event brings every year, and it's always a great time. So I just wanted to say thank you and for anybody that participated in the elementary challenges. Color Strand, Stober, and Prospect Valley won those challenges. So congratulations to them, and thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy?
Yeah, I just, I didn't say thank you to everybody for putting this budget together, so I do want to say thank you to all of our staff for their hard work. And I know that this time of the year typically is a stressful time, lots of extra work to make sure that all your decimal points are in the right place. So thank you. And then I want to say thank you to council for suffering through all the extra study sessions that we had so that we could hear a lot of these budget requests before the budget came up so that we could have a much smoother process this year while we were looking through our budget. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Urban?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to make sure everybody is aware that the election candidate forum will be hosted by the Wheat Ridge Chamber here in these chambers on September 24th from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. September 24th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m.
Thank you. Mr. Matthews, anything tonight? Ms. Davis?
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Pond? Thank you. Mr. Keeter?
Just to let people know, particularly District 1, that the TLC dumpster pickup is this Saturday morning at the Congregational Church on 29th Avenue. My understanding from the flyers that paving operations will be ongoing on 29th, so if that is correct, you may need to access that from the west because you may not be able to get there from the east, but I will be there, and it goes from 8 until noon or when the dumpsters are full and done. So come out and get rid of your garbage, recycling, yard waste, and they will also have shredding on site.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver?
This is from Goat Herd Amanda, not from Councilwoman Amanda. I just want to thank the city of Wheat Ridge and the police and Parks and Rec. The goats are back out at Lewis Meadows, and so they're just, it's been a great week so far. They'll be there for several weeks, and it's just, starting with the parade, people have been extremely supportive, and I just wanted to thank everyone for their support. They do have new surveillance equipment. That will remain nameless right now, but they are Goat Pro. They are being surveilled. So thank you, everybody, for all your support towards that.
Thank you. Mr. Goff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, I did forget one thing. So we are gearing up for our police chief recruitment process, and gearing up even more. We've been gearing up for several weeks here, but there's some meetings coming up this week, and there is a community forum that is available for anybody in the community that wants to come and provide any input to us and our recruiter on what type of chief we need for our community. So it is this Wednesday, 6:30, at the Wheat Ridge Recreation Center. So I think it's only scheduled for like an hour. So don't come too late if you have some feedback that you want to give. We'd love to hear from you on what type of attributes you would like to see in your next police chief.
There, there's also the survey, which I believe closes on the 22nd before we are back again. So if you can't make it, or if you can make it, please also take the survey.
Thank you. Ms. Weaver?
Quick question. Will the GOAT program continue to be under Park and Rec or under the Sustainability Coordinator?
Good question.
Maybe we should double the herd. And I would like to once again thank all of the staff, not just the directors, but this goes down into your staffs to help generate these budgets in a very thoughtful way and a great presentation. We had another speaker talk about a sustainable event that the mayors are involved with, or a bunch of mayors, and I'm one of that bunch. Next on Tuesday, the 24th, at the Denver Press Club, about 5:30, we'll be at a forum talking about sustainability and what our community does to move those efforts forward. So if you're not otherwise engaged in a terrific election forum down here, there's another way to spend your evening on the 24th, so never a dull moment. With that, if there's no more business to come before the study session, we will stand adjourned. Thank you.